Hello friends, I'm Samriddhi Banerjee and welcome to my channel The Mad Reader. In this video, I'm going to read out the story with the photographer, which is in the syllabus of class 10 English literature. Along with reading it out, I'm going to give out the theme of the story, explain it, as well as some important points of the story. Before jumping right into the story, let's know something about its author and what the story is based upon. The author of this story is Stephen Leacock, who was a Canadian teacher, political scientist, and writer. He is known for his light humor along with mild criticisms of people's foibles. This is all you need to keep in mind. You don't even need to stress upon it as an important point as far as your literature exam is concerned. Now, With the Photographer by Stephen Leacock has been narrated in the first person by an unnamed 40-year-old man. This is important, unnamed 40-year-old man, and narrated in the first person point of view. The reader realizes from the beginning of the story that Leacock may be exploring the theme of insecurity. There you have one of your themes. A humorous take on the protagonist's visit to a photographer, it is an experience that every individual can identify and contrast with the photography of today. We live in an age of Photoshop and political correctness where the remarks of the photographer and the attempts at body shaming would be absolutely unacceptable. Yet, the author can construct a hilarious situation which is inoffensive and totally relatable to the struggles of a studio experience. So that was it about the story and about the author. This story is an extremely easy one. I'm going to read through the whole of the story, but even then, if you have any doubt, feel free to write it out in the comment section. I'll respond to it as soon as possible. So let's start. With the Photographer. "I want my photograph taken," I said. The photographer looked at me without enthusiasm. He was a drooping man in a grey suit with the dim eye of a natural scientist. But there is no need to describe him. Everybody knows what a photographer is like. "Sit there," he said, "and wait." I waited an hour. I read the Ladies' Companion for 1912, the Girls' Magazine for 1902, and the Infant's Journal for 1888. I began to see that I had done an unwarrantable thing in breaking in on the privacy of this man's scientific pursuits with a face like mine. After an hour, the photographer opened the inner door. "Come in," he said severely. I went into the studio. "Sit down," said the photographer. I sat down in a beam of sunlight filtered through a sheet of factory cotton hung against a frosted skylight. The photographer rolled a machine into the middle of the room and crawled into it from behind. He was only in it a second, just time enough for one look at me, and then he was out again, tearing at the cotton sheet and the window panes with a hooked stick, apparently frantic for light and air. Then he crawled back into the machine again and drew a little black cloth over himself. This time he was very quiet in there. I knew he was praying and I kept still. When the photographer came out at last, he looked very grave and shook his head. "The face is quite wrong," he said. "I know," I answered quietly. "I've always known it." He sighed. "I think," he said, "the face would be better 3/4 full." "I'm sure it would," I said enthusiastically, for I was glad to find that the man had such a human side to him. "So would yours. In fact," I continued, "how many faces one sees that are apparently hard, narrow, limited, but the minute you get them 3/4 full, they get wide, large, almost boundless in..." But the photographer has ceased to listen. He came over and took my head in his hands and twisted it sideways. I thought he meant to kiss me, and I closed my eyes. But I was wrong. He twisted my face as far as it would go and then stood looking at it. He sighed again. "I don't like the head," he said. Then he went back to the machine and took another look. "Open the mouth a little," he said. I started to do so. "Close it," he added quickly. Then he looked again. "The ears are bad," he said. "Droop them a little more. Thank you. Now the eyes. Roll them in under the lids." Put the hands on the knees, please, and turn the face just a little upward. Yes, that's better. Now just expand the lungs. So, and hump the neck. That's it. And just contract the waist. Ha! And twist the hip up towards the elbow. Now, I still don't quite like the face. It's just a trifle too full, but I swung myself round on the stool. Stop! I said with emotion, but I think with dignity. This face is my face. It is not yours, it is mine. I've lived with it for 40 years and I know it's false. I know it is out of drawing. I know it wasn't made for me, but it's my face, the only one I have. I was conscious of a break in my voice, but I went on. Such as it is, I've learned to love it. And this is my mouth, not yours. These ears are mine. And if your machine is too narrow, here I started to rise from the seat. Snick! The photographer had pulled a string. The photograph taken. I could see the machine still staggering from the shock. I think, said the photographer, pursing his lips in a pleased smile, that I caught the features just in a moment of animation. So, I said bitingly, features, eh? You didn't think I could animate them, I suppose. But let me see the picture. Oh, there's nothing to see yet, he said. I have to develop the negative first. Come back on Saturday and I'll let you see a proof of it. On Saturday, I went back. The photographer beckoned me in. I thought he seemed quieter and graver than before. I think, too, there was a certain pride in his manner. He unfolded the proof of a large photograph, and we both looked at it in silence. Is it me? I asked. Yes, he said quietly, it is you. And then we went on looking at it. The eyes, I said hesitatingly, don't look very much like mine. Oh no, he answered, I've retouched them. They come out splendidly, don't they? Fine, I said. But surely my eyebrows are not like that? No, said the photographer with a momentary glance at my face. The eyebrows are removed. We have a process now, the Delphide, for putting in new ones. You'll notice here where we have applied it to carry the hair away from the brow. I don't like the hair low on the skull. Oh, you don't you? I said. No, he went on. I don't care for it. I like to get the hair clear back to the superficies and make out a new brow line. What about the mouth? I said with a bitterness that was lost on the photographer. Is that mine? It's adjusted a little, he said. Yours is too low. I found I couldn't use it. The ears, though, I said, strike me as a good likeness. They are just like mine. Yes, said the photographer thoughtfully. That's so. But I can fix that all right in the print. We have a process now, the sulfide, for removing the ears entirely. I'll see if... Listen! I interrupted, drawing myself up and animating my features to their full extent and speaking with a withering scorn that should have blasted the man on the spot. Listen! I came here for a photograph, a picture, something which, mad though it seems, would have looked like me. I wanted something that would depict my face as heaven gave it to me, humble though the gift may have been. I wanted something my friends might keep after my death to reconcile them to my loss. It seems that I was mistaken. What I wanted is no longer done. Go on then with your brutal work. Take your negative or whatever it is you call it, dip it in sulfide, bromide, oxide, cowhide, anything you like. Remove the eyes, correct the mouth, adjust the face, restore the lips, reanimate the necktie and reconstruct the waistcoat. Coat it with an inch of gloss, shade it, emboss it, gild it till even you acknowledge that it is finished. Then when you have done all that, keep it for yourself and your friends. They may value it. To me, it is but a worthless bauble. I broke into tears and left. Well, that was all for the story. The story is completed. Now I'm going to give you some important points which you definitely need to keep in mind for examination purposes. Beginning with the beginning, we have the first paragraph in which the description of the photographer is extremely important. You need to keep that in your mind. Secondly, we have the names of the magazines that the narrator was reading while waiting for the photographer. Questions can come like, how did the narrator spend his time while waiting for the photographer? And in that case, you'll need to write the names of these magazines that he had read these magazines and spent his time. Next on, we have the description of the room in which the photograph was to be taken. Beam of sunlight filtered through a sheet of factory cotton hung against a frosted skylight. You have this line. Then the next part is of minor importance. You have to understand the chronology of the events, that he first went behind and crawled into the machine, then came out after a second, just after one look at the man's face, and he teared at the window panes and the cotton sheets with a hooked stick, apparently frantic for light and air. Then he again crawled back into the machine, drew a little black cloth over himself. The narrator felt that he was praying and kept still. After that, the photographer came out at last, looked very grave and shook his head. Till this portion, you should read, you should understand the hierarchy or chronology of the events. Then the line, "the face is quite wrong," said by the photographer, is extremely important. It may come for reference to the context type questions, and so you need to know this line and every other thing in relation to it. Also, from here, the entire story is going to be important, and you need to remember the key points or the main factors that happened after this. After this, we have the big looking paragraph in which the narrator exclaims enthusiastically that his face would indeed look better 3/4 full, and he was glad to find that the photographer had such a human side to him. This line is irony. It is an ironical as well as a humorous statement, because this depicts extreme contradictory words. Okay. Now next, we have the photographer had ceased to listen. He came up to the narrator and take his face in his hand, twisted it as far as it would go and everything. After this, we directly go on to the next big looking paragraph of the same page, where the photographer instructs the narrator to do different things in order to make the picture come out looking good. So this paragraph is extremely important. In the next page, we find another big paragraph where we find the narrator getting emotional. Sorry for the bad joke. Anyways, where we find the narrator exclaiming how his face is his face and not the photographer's face, how his ears and eyes are his and not the photographer's, and all of this. You don't need to pay much attention to this. Just read it carefully. And after that, we come across a teeny weeny important thing. The important thing is that the photographer had taken the photograph precisely when the narrator had become extremely angry and had started to rise from his seat. Also keep in mind that that moment of anger and going away like desperation, giving up, is the definition of moment of animation to the photographer. After that, you don't have much important thing. You should just remember the day, Saturday, on which the narrator was supposed to come back to see how his picture had come out. So Saturday he went back, and then we find the photographer was quieter and graver than before. Analytical questions from this part won't come, but you should remember that the photographer was looking graver, quieter, and there was a pride in his manner. Okay. Now next up, we have the elements or features of the narrator which were removed or retouched in the photograph by the photographer. From this part to the end of the story, you can even memorize if you like, but I mean to say that it is the most important part of the story. You need to keep in mind all the elements that were changed or removed or retouched. You need to know what was the order. First the eyes, then the eyebrows, then the mouth, and then the narrator suggested about the ears. Don't make this mistake. The ears were not retouched, but the photographer had offered that he would retouch the eyes by a new process called sulfite. We have the final paragraph where the narrator is extremely angry. He's just breaking down at that point. He's extremely scornful to the photographer. You may or may not memorize it, but you have to know all the points that the narrator had said to the photographer. You may write it in your own language, but the keywords should be there. Now, basically summarizing this whole paragraph in my own language, the narrator had said to the photographer that the narrator had gone to the photographer for a photograph, something which would have looked like the narrator, even though the idea seems mad. He wanted his friends to have a keepsake after his death that would have reminded them, that would have reconciled them of his loss, but he found himself to be mistaken and his objective was not completed. That's why he says to the photographer, go on with your brutal work, take that negative or whatever you call it and do whatever you want with that thing. After that, you just find some extremely humorous and sarcastic things said by the narrator meant for the photographer. Basically, the narrator wants to emphasize that the photograph which the photographer had finally created was entirely worthless for him, and at this point he became very emotional and left the studio in tears. That was all about the story. I think I was able to explain it, convey what I meant and what the story meant to you. As for the theme of the story, you may write whatever theme you like, whatever theme you feel right or appropriate, as long as you can justify that theme with suitable textual instances. The best theme that you can write is the one given in the book, that is insecurity, and you have to justify it as well with textual instances. So that was it for this video. If you want more videos of this sort, more explanation type videos or more story type videos, you may subscribe to my channel, The Mad Reader. Also, don't forget to like this video because I put in a lot of effort in each and every one of my videos. We'll meet again in another video. Till then, goodbye.